The construction started in January, which wouldn't seem like a good time to build a house in Minnesota, unless you like ice fishing. But anyway, actually the gift of that was that the soil was frozen, and that sounds bad, but it was good because it's sandy soil. So we would have had terrible issues with the sliding of the edges of the foundation, and the fact that it was frozen helped out a lot. One of the goals was to be very careful of these wonderful big oak trees that were here and were a big part of the design of the house. So the excavator and I had a long discussion about how he would dig out the fill that was taken away and load it into trucks by staying within the footprint of the house. That was a bit of a project, but the gift is these beautiful trees that are still here that didn't have heavy machinery driving over them.
And we consulted with an arborist also as part of that process and got his advice about how close we could be to any one of these trees, which are very close to the foundation of the house, and took his advice. And my own experience in my previous house, I'd hired a different architect and didn't really want detailed drawings to do some renovation. And what I discovered was I spent a lot of time standing there with a contractor, scratching our heads, saying, all right, there are 3 or 4 different ways to do this. How do you think he meant us to do it? And having to make on-the-fly decisions right there. So I was really grateful that this process worked in a different way. We did not make any changes that I can think of during the construction process. We'd really worked through all that.
And what we find is that it seems like a whole lot of work to get it all down in order, but the more the contractor knows about what it is that you actually want him to do, the easier it is for them to say, oh, it'll cost exactly this much, and they don't have to cover their backside by saying, gosh, what is it they want here? That looks complicated. So a darn good set of construction drawings is an important communication that gives the client a better price on the project, and every client wants that. Every client. So this process means design, bid, build, which is different from design, build, which is pretty much the norm of how most projects happen for residential construction. The advantage is you get design, that's the architect, bid, that's the contractor, build, that's the contractor. But the architect is involved in this scenario in all 3 of those phases and is watching out for the owner's interests. So the owner's got a second set of eyes looking at the numbers. How does this come out here? And what we find as we look over the numbers with what it costs to have an architect and a builder build versus the design build scenario, which seems up front to be less expensive, is that very often with all the overhead and the hidden cost of what it takes to complete the design build, that it's pretty much the same price. So that's quite interesting. It's a good value for the client to have their owner's rep be the architect, which doesn't mean you get in fights with a contractor. It just means there's somebody paying attention.
Sarah and I called them the Bobs, although they called themselves Bob and Bobby. They are father and son team, and they were the carpenters on the construction project, and they were the face of the contractor for me for many, many months while the framing went on. And I would come over and visit, and we would chat, and often they would say, you know, somebody needs to resolve this question or problem, and then I would feed it back into Sarah's office. And so there was, again, they were part of the communication loop.
I'd say that in any project, the architect draws the drawings, and that's just one part of the communication. Until the last nail is hammered in, it's not all done until it's done. And that communication with the Bobs, as we love to call them, was what really solves and makes it all work together. And they're caring and saying, gosh, you know, let's talk about this right here. That's a level of the problem solving that makes it all fit together and end up the wonderful house that it is.
Well, and they were your PR firm, because they would say, I gotta tell you, this house is really designed to be terrific. It's really going to be airtight. It's really well designed. So they were on your team.